Okay, today we are going to speak about the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, the mitzvah that is considered to be the greatest mitzvah of all our mitzvahs. And this is to redeem, to release hostages, prisoners, people that were taken captive. Yes, Prima.
I learned in my class that Shvuyim is only for soldiers.
Okay, so we're going to speak about that, the difference between soldiers and civilians. We'll open all of these topics up today. This is the purpose. And Shvuyim, right, okay.
Today.
Right, so Shvuyim is at captives. You're not allowed to capture like civilians. It's, one of the things is that it doesn't make sense that there are innocent women and children there and they need to be returned. That shouldn't be that way in the first place. And unfortunately, this is one of the crazy things that are happening. We'll speak about soldiers and the difference between them, not only in the term, what we call it, what name we give them, but also in the obligation towards returning them back home. Shavui comes from the word lashuv, to return. And yeah, there are those that are kidnapped as well. Let's speak a bit. So our two questions, if we speak about Israel at war, is first of all, should we, do we have any obligation to bring them back? And if, and what is the type of obligation that we have? And if we do have, what is our obligation to give in exchange in return? So we're gonna examine our history, our Jewish history that is full of those cases, those stories, and we're going to speak about halachic laws, basically Torah laws that speak about these ideas, and we will bring the Rebbe's opinion about the whole idea, because this is not the first time that Israel is facing such a situation. So our parsha is Parshas Vayigash. And Parshas Vayigash is basically Yehuda confronting Yosef without knowing that he's Yosef. He thought he's just viceroy. And he confronts him and he tells him, you have to release Binyamin. And this is a connection to our Parsha. What Yosef was basically doing, he was there. Part of the mission was to release his brother Binyamin as a hostage. And there he uses a very special and interesting term, because Yosef tells him, why are you interfering more than any of the other brothers? Why are you so upset about it? He said, I was what's called an arev. I was a guarantor. I was the middleman that told my father, I'm going to take Binyamin to go and purchase food, because that's what Yosef required. And I guarantee that I will bring him back. And we know the famous quote, Kol Yisrael Arevim ze lazeh. We are all guarantees for each other. And that is one aspect, one approach, one way of understanding the reason why throughout our Jewish history we were always there to save our brothers and sisters. Starting from the days of Avram. Avram was the first one to release the hostage. Who was the hostage?
Son.
Lot. Very good. Lot was his cousin, and or Lot was his brother. Lot was his brother.
Nephew.
Sorry, his nephew. Right. Haran. So he was Haran's son, so it's his nephew. And Og Melech Habashan, the giant, comes over to him and he said, have you heard of the world war that's broke out? 4 kings against the 5 kings. So he says, no, tell me about it. Your nephew is taken hostage, Lot and his family. And Avram Avinu runs with his, the Na'arim, which is probably the fighters that are together with him. He goes and he beats the 4 kings, releases Lot, and the other nations crown him as Emek Shaveh. That's the place where it was. Who Emek HaMelech, that was the Valley of the King. Why was it called the Valley of the King? Because they named Avram to be a king over all the nations. He didn't actually carry that out. He didn't want to become king, really, but that was what they offered him. That is the first story in history. And the second story is about Amalek. We know that Amalek started war against Israel, the Jews, while they were in the desert. And one of these wars was basically, the Torah says one word, Vayish Mimenu Shevi, which means they captured someone. And it says it was a maid. It wasn't even someone that was the way that they used to travel. Everyone was protected by the clouds, right? The Ananei Kavod. And there was one that was left outside. The maid was left outside, and Am Yisrael went to war for that one maid that they captured. Now there's another story. Of course, we've got our parsha that it speaks about Yosef. By the way, when Shimon was taken captive, we don't see the brothers starting a fight and starting a combat. One of the reasons was that, and that's why he chose Shimon out of all the other brothers, because Shimon and Levi were two very close brothers. They were also close in age, but not only close in age, close in temper and in planning. And they were the ones that destroyed the city of Shechem. So he wanted to separate the two. But we don't see that Yaakov Avinu sent anyone, any rescue squad or rescue team to go and bring back Shimon. And it seemed like there was not much of a negotiation as well. But when it comes to Binyamin, that's when Yehuda interferes and basically tells Yosef, by the way, he tells Yosef, Ki kamocha kefaro, which means if you won't, one of the explanations is that if you won't release him, then I will treat you and Paro in the same way, and I will kill you both. So he's threatening them as well. It's not only he approaches with basically a few ways. One of the things is that he says it's not just to do such a thing. We didn't take the cup. And the other one was, he told him clearly, we are prepared to go to war for that rescue. By the way, Amalek also did it later on in the times of King David. In times of King David, it's known, there was a city of Tziklag, which was basically a city in Israel, and Amalek raided that city and took the women and the children as hostage, and also Am Yisrael went to war against Amalek at that time, and that happened again, yes.
Could Yitzchak be considered a hostage?
When, in which case?
During the Akedah. He was under complete control by the father.
So it says, it's a very interesting point. It says that he understood where he was going. He understood very well where he was going to, because he asks his father.
The purpose.
Okay, but that's a different thing. Was with, at the end of the day, it says it was with his consent as well. Because at the beginning it says, Vayelchu shnehem yachdav, they both went together. It says that twice. Vayelchu shnehem yachdav, the first time they both went together with the same heart, which means with a complete heart. Avram knowing that he's about to kill his son, and Yitzchak unaware of the fact that he is the offering. And that shows the greatness of Avram himself, that he went in the same heart that as his son, even though his son didn't even know, and he knew that he's going to sacrifice his son. But he went with the same heart, the same thing. And then it says at another time, by and that comes after the question of Yitzchak to Avram. He asks Avram, Father, I see we've got fire, I see we've got wood, but we don't have an offering. And Avram is silent. And Yitzchak understands very, very well that he is the one that is supposed to be the offering. And after that, it says, Vayelchu shnehem yachdav, they went together, which means Yitzchak went with a complete heart in the exact same way as Avram went. That's to answer your question, but of course it's not the same type of hostage. In any case, it's a different case scenario. So what we see in common with all of these stories is that there was not much negotiation. We don't see negotiation with Amalek. We don't see negotiation with Paro. We could say with Yosef, we could say there was a bit of negotiation. I will be instead of him, which is also very interesting. Of course, with Avram, we don't see negotiation at all. So we've got to learn from that also about today our days today. By the way, there was a story about, and this a friend of mine actually sent me a quote from the Rebbe Maharash. So we have heard there was an operation to bring back soldiers that were kidnapped, their bodies, and they brought from Gaza. They basically kidnapped their bodies, and they and the soldiers went in to rescue the bodies. 2 soldiers were killed during that operation. So there is a similar story of rescuing bodies, not living people, also in the Tanakh. I've got to find it just one moment. And we have a quote from the Rebbe Maharash. Okay, so he put it he put it up on his status, and it's not there anymore. But I'm going to ask him for it because it's very interesting. So there is another story. So first of all, is it okay to do such a thing, or is it not okay? Why are you risking soldiers just to bring bodies? There's an importance, by the way, in the Second Lebanon War, the soldiers that were kidnapped, they died. They were not alive. And we still released prisoners in order to get them back. And they started the Second Lebanon War just because of that story. And here, there is very interesting. There is a place. Okay, so it's a story of King Saul. There's a story of Kings in the book of Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel, about King Saul. Unfortunately, his last war, he did not return back alive from that with his sons. So it says, Vayihimi Macharat, after the war, the Philistines came to the battlefield. Vayimtzu et Shaul ve'et shloshet banav. They find Shaul, 3 of his sons, and it says Vayichrasus Rosh. They chop his head off, and they don't treat the bodies with respect. Vayishmau, and after that, Yoshve Yavesh Gilad. They hear, these are people of Israel, they hear what the Philistines did to Saul, and it says that they raise and they went all night, and they got the bodies of King Saul and his sons. They rescued them and they brought them to a proper Jewish burial. So here we see that, yes, they went on a very special operation during nighttime to take it from the cities of the Philistines and to bring them to burial. So we see that there is an importance to go and rescue, even if it's just bodies. So that is from the story of King Saul. And there's a quote from the Rebbe Maharash. I didn't see the source itself. That's why I don't know how much it's 100% accurate. But the Rebbe Maharash says that if people go and they rescue, bring another person to Jewish burial, they have a very, very high merit that no one can reach their level in Gan Eden. So it is something very, very special. We know the importance of what Zakah does, which is basically to bring the Jews to a proper Jewish burial. And Bezrat Hashem, we're planning to have a lecture from one of the people of Zakah, generally about their work and specifically about their work during the 7th of October. So that is just to summarize another part of our history that has to do not only with hostages that are alive, but hostages that are dead as well. Very, very important to treat the Jewish body with respect and to bring them to a Kever Israel. Yes.
We also have the instance where a soldier who was killed had written to his father beforehand, do not trade anything.
Yes, right.
Not one.
Do not trade any
Right.
soldiers or
Right. So here we're going to speak. This is exactly our topic. Is it okay to trade? Is it not okay? Because definitely we know the importance and we can see it throughout history. So the Rambam is the first one to speak in terms of halakha about bringing hostages back. And then it was very common. Today we call it human trafficking, Then it was pirates that used to capture ships or convoys going through the desert with camels, with donkeys, whatever it might be. But people used to get caught, and they were sold in a market, and there was a value. So the Rambam says, and this is based, of course, on the Gemara, that there's a huge mitzvah. It's the greatest mitzvah. And why? Because the Rambam says, if you think about it one moment, you will see that within Pidyon Shvuyim, returning them back, there are many other mitzvahs also. Like, for example, v'chai achicha imach. You've got to make sure that your brother can live with you. Ahavas Yisrael. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. Which means don't see someone else suffering. So the mitzvah of tefillin is just one mitzvah. To put on tefillin. Lighting Shabbos candles is one mitzvah. Pidyon Shvuyim, if we take a look at it, that contains several mitzvahs and very important mitzvahs. That is why Pidyon Shvuyim is the greatest. So this is basically the source and the explanation to the idea that Pidyon Shvuyim is bemet special. And we see in the Gemara several stories about Pidyon Shvuyim. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, he basically was once on the way to redeem someone. And he came across a river and he couldn't cross the river. And this is what he says. It's a famous quote. It's brought in Hasidus. He caused the river to split. Ginai, ginai, chalok li meimecha. Split so I can go through. And the river did not want to split. The river told him, I'm not sure that you will be able to rescue that hostage. I will definitely continue flow. So why should I stop my mission for your mission? Yes, your mission is important, but it's not guaranteed. Maybe the person's dead. Maybe they won't let him out. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair nevertheless commanded him, and that's how the river basically split. But here we are seeing, first of all, another proof to the importance of Pidyon Shvuyim and another story from the Gemara itself where it started. Yes, Ofadia.
Don't some of these rules also apply just in life and death situations? Like you can't just jump into the water if you can't swim to bring someone drowning.
Right.
So there are rules.
Right. So we're going to speak about two other interesting options. First of all, it's, am I obligated to risk my life to save someone else's? And another one is Yachid Mura Rabim, which means what happens when it's the benefit of one compared to the benefit of many. Okay, so we'll see how it's also connected to our days today. That is more the halachic side of things, and we are getting closer to that. The Gemara, by the way, another interesting idea, it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that's 10 commandments. I am Hashem, your God. Asher, that, what did I do? Asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. That I rescued you from Egypt. Why does it not say that I created the world? Well, when you describe Hashem, what is the best thing that he did? What is he most known for? And I am Hashem, your God, that created all of this. Why does it not say, Asher barati shamayim va'aretz?
Just said that's the biggest mitzvah.
Exactly. So that will also explain that what happened in Egypt, it's not only Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's rescuing Am Yisrael. That's what it mostly, that was Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the idea behind it. So that is the second part. So that's the explanation to Anochi Hashem Elokecha to answer that as well. Okay. So here's now a very, very interesting Gemara. And the Gemara says two important things. It says, En podim et hashvuyim yoter mikedei dmehem. Which means, we do not free hostages more than their value. And why? Mipnei tikun ha'olam. Because we want to make sure that to minimize any type of loss, or we don't want to encourage people to start kidnapping Jews. The moment you go and are prepared to pay. I'm not speaking about security issues here. I'm just speaking about pirates that basically went and they kidnapped a ship, and they're selling now everyone over there. And they see here there's a Jewish person, and they want to sell him. He's not worth much on the market, but they're going to sell him triple the amount. And the Jews in Turkey, in any other city that was in Venice, in any other city on the shore, they are prepared to pay triple. Not allowed it. Because that will encourage them to go searching for Jews because they're worth much more on the market.
Than anybody else.
Than anyone else, yes. So, and it reminds me of we spoke about it once, that one of the most, I think it's the craziest claims that we heard with the double standard approach that they have towards Israel was a question of one of the journalists: why do you release 3 Palestinians for one Jewish hostage? Is that because you think that the Palestinians' life are not worth a lot? That was their question. So, of course, it's a very silly question from any aspect you would look at it, but most of all, it shows that there's a lot of Jew hatred, like Hanoch likes to say, Jew hatred behind the motives of a lot of the journalists and many others today, and everyone knows that, and it's very, very clear. So this is the one halakha. Second of all, it says we are not allowed to go and actively rescue Jewish hostages initially. Why? Because shelo tichbad alehem yad ha-shovim. Because we don't want the captors to increase their security over them and to make their life too miserable. Imagine if they would know that the Jews in every single case are prepared to go to war, and they're going to try and by force they're going to try and rescue the hostages, so they wouldn't give them an easy time in prison. That's another halakha. Very interesting. How does that work with what we do today, where it's very, very clear? How does that work out with what we just read in history, the war of Amalek, Avraham Avinu going and by force fighting those 4 kings in order to release Lot? How does that work with this Gemara? So the Gemara says, first of all, don't release them for too much money. Second of all, don't try and release them by force, because you will cause next time the pirates to make their life much more miserable. We don't want to do that as well, right? And Ben-Gvir, for example, said that every day that they don't bring the hostages back, they should execute one of the Hamas terrorists. I think it's something not smart at all to say. Let's put it that way. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to start releasing prisoners? Not at all. So I don't know if he really meant it. I don't know if it was something that was quoted, but sometimes people just speak out also. It could happen. He's got many good things, but that specifically does not make sense at all. So on the other hand, we do see that in history, Am Yisrael went to war for their hostages, and today we go to war for hostages. There's no doubt about it. So how does that work with the Gemara? We'll speak about that as well. Okay, so let's see. We've got here 2 important things to discuss. What about rescuing someone else's life in order to release a hostage? Is that something that is okay to do? Are we obligated to do it or not?
Say that again. Risk our life.
Should we risk our lives in order, let's say even I'm just one person, and I see that we're not even talking about our days, right? Let's say 1,000 years ago, they came and they captured, pirates captured a person. should you go and put yourself in danger in order to rescue him or not? So in other words, is this mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim, is that mitzvah also, does that also apply when I'm putting myself in danger? It's not definite danger. We're not saying that 100% something might happen, but should you put yourself at risk in order to release someone else?
Should I put myself at risk, or should a soldier put himself at risk?
It applies also to soldiers. Do they have an obligation? So here's the other thing, and we can already speak about it now. This Gemara is not talking about war. War is a different case, and let's speak about it right here and right now. War is a different case totally. And this explains the contradiction between the history stories and the Gemara. When the Gemara says, don't go and try rescue them, it's not talking about a case of war. A case of war, there is pikuach nefesh, and it's not only in a case of actual war, but we will soon see a very special halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, the last halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Chaf Tes 329. That's in the Shulchan Aruch, and it's very interesting. But it's clear that there's a difference between war and for money, or not even for money, but when someone, I'm going to take Mordechai your question in a minute. When someone comes and he tries to kidnap your people, there are two things. It's all to get money or some kind of pressure, but it's clear that they're not going to do much to his life. And even if they would, it's not an act of war. But when it's an act of war, then you are allowed to initiate war as well. And we're going to see there's a great halacha about this in Shin Chaf Tes. Yes, ma'am.
All right, a couple of comments. I think the idea of rescuing a hostage when you're putting your own self at risk can also be applied to first responders. Rescuing somebody that is in an emergency situation where there's a lot of risk in able to initiate the rescue. And you have the idea that to save a life is to save a world. And what is the value of saving a world, even if it's at cost to ourselves?
Right. Okay. That's a very good point, and we're going to speak about that as well. Okay. So let's see. What is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch? So it says like this. Akum shetzaru al ayarot Israel. If there are idol worshippers that lay siege on cities of Israel, if they are coming for money, you're not allowed to violate the Shabbat. You're not allowed to break Shabbos. If they come for nefashot, which means to kill, so then you're allowed to violate the Shabbos. And here's the most important part. Ube'ir hasamuch al asfar. If it's a city or a village that is on the border, even if they are only here to ask for a bit of hay and a bit of wheat, you are allowed to break Shabbos for that. And this is a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that the Rebbe spoke a lot about in connection to our current situation. We know that when the terrorists around us and countries around us that even claim, they want this part, they want that part, it has a din, it has the law of a city that's on the border. And when it's a city on the border, it means, why is a city on the border different to a city in the middle of the country? Why am I allowed to break the Shabbat when they're coming towards a city on the border, and I'm not allowed to break the Shabbat when they're coming to a city in the middle of the land? What's the difference?
They're saving their country.
Yes, but they are in the country. Let's say they siege one in the middle. You're right. It's basically saving the country, because when they're coming to the border, this is an act of war. And even if they're starting with just requesting cash v'tev and they just want a bit of hay, that's not their real reason. That's not truly why they are there. It's an act of war. It's known. Israel started a war twice with Egypt because of them closing the Tiran Straits. Tiran Straits are the entrance between the Indian Ocean, I think, and the Red Sea, if I'm not mistaken. It's after there's the Bab el Mandeb, that's the current place where the Houthim are basically threatening now, which is a bit closer to the Indian Ocean. And then after that, there are other strains, which are the Tiran Straits. They're under the Egyptians' control. And twice, that was the beginning of the 6-Day War. That's an act of war.
We declared war?
We did. Twice we did. When Israel was strong.
Starting war.
Sorry?
It's a little different than starting war. I like to think Israel actually never started a war. I mean,
So by definition, when someone, this is Allah and Shulchan Aruch, when someone comes to and knocks on your door, one of those villages, right, that's on the border, and he tells them, give me now a bit of hay. He's not there for the hay. He's there because he's looking for a way to really enter your country, to take it over. When someone says that you're not allowed to bring shipments with any type of goods, with oil, with whatever it might be, products from China, and they stop that from going through those strains, by definition, that is that's calling for war.
it's being semantic.
What was the first?
We declared the war on October 7th or 8th.
Right,
Let's say it started.
right, yeah. Yeah, we could say so, yeah. They didn't declare war, they never do it,
Right.
because they want to keep everything legal.
But they, it sounded,
Did we start the war when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in the United States?
no.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm
Right,
saying.
right, but you declared war once they started it.
Against it.
When they started.
So here we see, sorry,
What was the first one? That Israel declared?
1956 as well. It happened in 1956. Yes.
67?
Mivtza, that was Mivtza Kadesh. That was the Kadesh operation. Israel conquered in 6 days the entire Sinai desert, all the way to the Suez Canal. That was with the support of the British and French. I don't know if they all supported at the end. It was just their international so-called support, because it was all politics about who owned the Suez Canal. Very interesting, that whole story. But yeah, so okay, so now we understand that all of these halachot apply mainly when it comes to and this reminds me also of another quote of Amir Peretz about the Iron Dome. We'll speak about it in a moment, but just to make it clear, if it's tactical, which means if someone just goes and it's a bunch of pirates kidnapping ships, and one of those ships happen to be Jewish, or raiding cities, and one of those cities, there are Jews that live there and they take them hostage, in that case, you are obligated to redeem them, but not more than the value, and also not by force. But the moment there is an act of war, we see that Am Yisrael, when the Amalek, when they started and they just kidnapped one person, Am Yisrael went to war. Avram, he went to war because that was in the middle of a war. That's an act of war. And also in our case, we will see that we are allowed to release them even using force, because again, this is war. This is part of war. It's a different thing totally. And just to speak a bit about the Iron Dome, so Amir Peretz was the one that, he lived in Sderot, and he was the one that pushed the production of the Iron Dome, even though they told him it's not cost friendly. Each missile there costs like 100 times what it cost the Palestinians to shoot their missiles. And perhaps it's not really worth it. And Amir Peretz, or one of the people that said, we are not a grocery store. A country does not operate in the same way as a grocery store does, right? A grocery store, you have to check what's worth it for you, what's not worth it. And based on that, you decide what are you going to order and what you're going to sell and what you're not going to sell, etc. A country, there are certain things that we have to stand strong for. And this brings me to the Rebbe's opinion about releasing hostages. So this was the year was 1979, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Hezbollah that they captured one. No, sorry, it wasn't the Hezbollah that started. Afterwards, it was another Palestinian terrorist organization. They caught a soldier by the name of Avraham Amram. And you can look that up. Avraham Amram was one soldier, and Israel released him for 70 plus terrorists. And that was, I think, the first time that Israel actually was prepared to go and release. And the Rebbe spoke very much against it. The Rebbe clearly spoke against releasing them. And the Rebbe did bring in, and this is very interesting to see, because the Rebbe does pay attention to the various halachot about it. And these halachot are, for example, and I'll give you just a quote. Why we are allowed to release many terrorists for one prisoner, in theory. It's because that prisoner is in a risk of life, and we have to do everything we can to bring him back. To the extent that the Maimonides says this halakha, and unfortunately it took place in different versions in Germany during the Holocaust and in Poland during the Holocaust. What happens if there's a country that lays siege on a Jewish city, and they say, bring me out one Jew and we will kill him. And if you don't bring him out, we're going to kill every single one of you. What should we do in that case? Should we give them one of ours, or should we let them kill all of us? And again, in Germany, this happened during the Holocaust. Sometimes they did these things to cause a lot of pain. They said, or you give us, for example, sometimes it's, or you give us the rabbi, and if you don't give us the rabbi, so we're going to kill every single Jew. So in many cases, the rabbis went to the Germans themselves and to save the other Jews. But what happens, again, if they say, just give me one Jew, they're not naming anyone, so we don't know even who they want, but they say just one. I'm allowed to go and take one Jew, give them to the Germans, but I'm saving the entire city. Is it better?
Killed also. That one Jew would be killed with everybody else.
So you are for giving that Jew. You've got a raffle and give it. That makes sense in a certain way. What do you think?
No.
No. Why not?
Because it's just not right, because we're all part of each other, because they might decide to kill all of us anyway. It's just like. So
we're all part of each other. I like that explanation. We are all one unit. And right, we have some kind of bond that we're not allowed to just. So it's very interesting to see these topics. It's also a philosophical question. And I once watched on social media. I once watched on Harvard. They have a course. I don't know exactly what it is about, but their question is, what happens if there's a train? That the train is going straight forward. Now you have the ability, the train lost control. You have the ability to move the train to this side. And by moving it to this side, you're going to kill one person for sure. But if you let the train continue, it's going to kill for sure two people over here. What do? Do you move the train to that side to save one? Or do you let the train continue and it kills two?
Can't you let this train stop?
No. Lost
Why?
control. Because it lost control.
it's.
Philosophical.
That's a different situation than turning into.
Why?
Yeah, really.
It's similar because You have an opportunity to save an entire city.
If it weren't a Jew,
And let me make this question realistic, right? For example, when we release a Jewish hostage, right? When we release Gilad Shalit, what we're basically doing, we're letting all these murderers out. And this is what happened. And it's been proven that they will go back to doing terror
And murder.
and murder. And that's what happened.
And
So do we release that soldier in exchange to 1,000 terrorists that will go back to do terror and probably murder others or not?
how about even if
So these are tough questions, by the way, right? It's not easy, not simple. What I want to tell you, what the halacha says, what the Rambam said.
the parents of the hostages will do everything.
Right, 100%. So yeah. So yeah, that's emotional, and 100%. I agree with their desire, and I don't want to be in the same place because I know what I would want 100%. But here we come to the halacha. What the halacha says is that you do not give one Jew to save an entire city. Yes. And why is that? It's very interesting. It doesn't make sense, but in the value of neshamas, we're not going to speak about that. We don't know the value of neshamas, but that's not the only point. The point is that actively you cannot prefer one over the other. And more than that, if someone comes and tells you, I force you to kill someone else, you have to be killed. Why? I want to save myself first. So there was a question that was brought to one of the rabbis in the times of the Gemara, and the quote was, "My chazi de dami didaf zoyed fair." Is your blood more red than his blood? And that is again the question that tells us that we are not allowed to give actively one person to be killed, and if they want to kill everyone, that's their problem. And speaking about the train, so I'm not allowed to actively move the train and kill someone. If the train's on its route and it's killing two others, it's the train's problem. It's not really, I'm not actively doing something wrong. There's a difference between acting and not acting, passive, letting it happen. Yes, it's not a comfortable situation, but it's much less under your responsibility. So, again, these are very deep topics and deep subjects, and it's not really easy. By the way, so according to that, we are allowed to, and perhaps we should release hostages. And the Rebbe is very much aware to that idea. And the Rebbe clearly speaks about that. The Rebbe says he knows that in halacha, we are supposed to sometimes release hostages, but it's different. And it's different, and perhaps this is based on the Shulchan Aruch Siman Shin Chavtes that we spoke about, but in the words of the Rebbe, it's like this. The Rebbe, by the way, says that the USSR, Soviet Union, and the United States exchanged prisoners. It was like 5-2 or 5-3. So he says that makes sense, or it's like in any war, by the way, and I think it was also with the Syrians and the Egyptians, that you give back all of your prisoners and we give back all of our prisoners. It doesn't have to be the same amount, but it's the idea that we end a war in that way. That's common sense. Common sense doesn't work. It doesn't work here with the Arabs, unfortunately. And the Rebbe here speaks about the idea that Israel set a certain bar. And Israel until now said, we are not negotiating with the terrorists. The moment you do negotiate and you do show this weakness, that is the real problem. So there's no real problem with actually releasing 1 to 1,000. We can release 1 to 1,000. It's a mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim. And the fact that they will return to terror, we are not actively going and killing. So it's okay to do it, and it's a big mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim. But here it's a different. It's teaching the Palestinians, teaching the Arabs that we are weak. And this has to do with the same halakha that even if they come and they ask for a bit of hay, but their real meaning is an act of war. And in an act of war, everything is different. In an act of war, we are not allowed to negotiate at all because that will limit our abilities to win them over. And we are allowed to rescue them by force. We spoke about the Gemara says you shouldn't rescue them by force. War is totally different. It is some kind of, I wouldn't call it exactly pikuach nefesh, but we are on an ongoing war for 75 years. We are still, and that was the big mistake that, and the Rebbe speaks about it, that we want to just relax. You know, we are normal after all. Unlike our enemies. I hope that goes through YouTube. We desire life. We cherish life. And in that case, it's very, very hard to live a normal life. But we have to know, and this is what we tried to do for 20 years. That's why we were trying to give them money, you know, and to try. But it didn't work. Because we are actually in war here constantly, every single moment. That should be the approach and the mindset of the leaders and of the people over here. And malasot, that's why all these halachot are applied to pirates. The Palestinians today are not even pirates. They are actively in war with us for 75 years. That's why we can use force to release the hostages. And that's why we shouldn't negotiate at all, because it's still in process of a war. Mm-hmm. Avraham Avinu, when he went to rescue Lot, he didn't try and negotiate with the 4 kings. When Amalek came to Israel and they just took one maid even, it's a maid. I'll tell you a secret, could be she wasn't even considered 100% Jewish. And what happens, we know that the Hamas, by the way, and this is something important that everyone should know, Hamas took hostage and killed Arabs as well. A lot of them Bedouins, not only Bedouins. One of those 3 hostages that unfortunately were killed by the fire of the IDF, one of them was an Arab. Are we obligated to go to war for them as well? There's a story that Am Yisrael did. And why is that? Because it's an act of war. An act of war, they come for cash and tevin. They just want a bit of hay. That's not their real meaning. And you have to show that you are strong. You've got to declare war, and you've got to complete the war. So, again, the heart of Am Yisrael is very wide and very loving. And that's why if we have an opportunity to release the women and the children and the elderly, and probably that's going to be the next step. Take a pause of 2 weeks and bring them out. And again, these are questions that I can't even say if it's 100% okay or not. Trying to base ourselves on the Gemara and on these, because these are things that we never faced. But definitely there's a lot of room to understanding that approach, together with understanding that it's not negotiation. Because the moment we negotiate, we are giving in, we are surrendering. The Rebbe, for example, and I want to take your question in a moment, the Rebbe, for example, was against the peace deal with Egypt. The Rebbe wasn't totally against it. The Sinai Desert is not a holy land. It's not part of Israel. But the Rebbe was against the way that it was done. The Rebbe was pro-Jewish pride. You conquered a piece of land. Don't just give it back in return to a piece of paper. Tell them we are keeping the oil. We are keeping the shore. We are keeping... That's the Rebbe's approach to all of these things. You have to show that you are powerful. When someone knocks on the door and he's asking for cash and tevin, why doesn't the Gemara say, just give him the hay? That's all he's asking for. Why are you allowed to violate the Shabbos, break the Shabbos?
It's an excuse.
It's an excuse, and it's a testing, perhaps. 100%. And that is why we have to stay strong and firm in these cases. Yes, you wanted to ask something before?
Yes, thank you. Considering that when we do these ceasefires and the negotiations, we are actually giving prisoners for criminals. The thing is that all of those people that we gave back they had committed attempted murder, which is a crime anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And why would we do that? That shows us not only to be weak, but also to be lawless.
Right.
When we take people because they attempted murder, they wanted to murder and
I
they committed
agree.
murder.
I agree. But just one,
Who should we give back then?
no one in theory.
That's right.
But this is the point that I don't have the courage to face those children that were there and their families and to tell them, no, we are not prepared to release you. And that's what.
No, but what we should do, because we have them in our custody for attempted murder,
Yeah.
we should treat them like they already murdered, because that's what they're going to do anyway. I
And
mean, there was somebody I read about that suggested that we start shooting them in the head instead of, then there wouldn't be anything to talk about.
right. So exactly, it's not really going to help.
No, yeah. So what do you do?
So that's why, and this is what I said at the end. Our case is extremely hard to understand what to do. Extremely hard from any angle you would try and look at it. In theory, if they would really properly initiate war and the way that war should really be, then we would be in a different game totally. Then I think that they would be able to bring many more hostages in a shorter amount of time. But we are going according to a different type of law, a conventional war. And in that case, the only way to bring some of the hostages back is through these several days of ceasefire. Yes. Blima.
Yeah, does the Metro consider a lot of
Hi, Shalom. Sorry?
Does the Metro take a lot into account
It's a good question.
when they always make up?
Sure. B'Simcha Rabba. We are just about to end, but we're still discussing a few points of this year. So you're welcome to stay and yeah. So it's interesting. Yes, there are many. They don't act 100% according to the halakha, and again, the halakha doesn't speak about any case, so it's not easy. But they do take it into consideration, and that's why we have many rabbis, by the way, that they do say that we should do deals like that, and others say that we shouldn't. It's a discourse in the Jewish halakha as well. There's no one clear a path or explanation to this idea. Yes, but it's definitely a very difficult situation. We've seen the story of Yosef and Yehuda, that Yehuda basically does try and negotiate with him. He tells him, listen, I will be there instead of Benjamin. I'm prepared to be there instead of him. And Yosef does not accept that. Yosef doesn't. He says, no, I'm just. He was the one that stole my cup. He's the one that should sit in prison. And then Yehuda says, Kol Yisrael Arevim. I am an Arev. I'm a guarantor to my brother. And for that reason, I have to let him out. And perhaps this is also the feeling today. By the way, you spoke about soldiers. Is there a difference between releasing soldiers that were taken hostage and just civilians? So the commitment of the army towards the soldiers is much deeper for several reasons. The basic reason is that the soldiers should feel free to fight. Imagine a soldier knowing that we're not going to do anything to bring him back. He's not going to want to fight. So the commitment and the Kol Yisrael, by the way, in those days, people used to write in their ketubah, which means their commitment to their wives. They used to write that in case someone kidnaps you, I will do everything I can to bring you back. And today we don't write it because today this thing doesn't really exist. We would think that it doesn't really exist. but it's not in the same scale that it used to be then. But then it was a serious, condition that could have happened. And by the way, the Gemara also says that, right? We spoke about the law that we are not allowed to release a prisoner for more than what he's worth. But when it comes to a wife, a spouse, a husband, you are allowed to. And what if that is going to cause them more of an appetite to go and take more hostage? So your life is in priority over someone else's. Yes. It's like the Gemara, by the way, the Gemara brings another interesting moral question. What happens if two people are walking in the desert and they have one bottle of water? They don't have the gemach that we have here outside with many, many bottles of water. They just have one. So what do? Are they, and by the way, the first rabbi that spoke there says that you should split it. And both of them will die. So both of them will die. And it says, Ad Sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came and he said, V'chai achicha imach, you should let your brother live with you, which means that your life comes before your brother's life. They needed to wait for Rabbi Akiva to say a clear opinion. It's interesting, which means that there was a feeling in the Bet Midrash that when they were discussing this, there was a feeling that it doesn't make sense. But no one could bring a proof to that. No one could bring a source from the Gemara or from the Torah. So Rabbi Akiva was the one to initiate that and to bring the source. So in that case, yes, the families that they have their loved ones there in prison or captive, they prioritize their lives over everyone else's life. And they are allowed to. And that's the way it should be. Because, again, you're not allowed, you can prioritize your own life if it doesn't come at the immediate cost of someone else's. If you're not actively going and killing someone else, then you can prioritize your life. So we had a very interesting, and I'm going to take a few questions because it's a very interesting topic. We had an interesting shiur today on the subject of bring them home. Now, how do we see in Jewish history, how did we treat hostages in the past? We saw the story of Abraham releasing his nephew Lot. We saw the story of Yosef in our parsha, and Yehuda going and releasing his brother Binyamin, even threatening to go to war. We saw the stories of Amalek fighting Am Yisrael and taking captive just a maid that probably wasn't even Jewish. And Am Yisrael goes to war against them. We brought the halachic aspect of, for example, not to redeem them more than their value, not to redeem them by force. But we said that has to do with pirates. That's not war. We are talking here about war, and in that case, we are allowed to go by force, and we shouldn't release, as the Rebbe says, we shouldn't release more prisoners because, again, it's part of a war. And when we are part of a war, we are 75 years in war, we cannot afford such a thing to show that we are weak. Yes, there are two other stories that I want to share afterwards, but let's speak a bit about the questions.
So how do we respond to the people in Israel who are prioritizing the release of the hostages against the success of the war?
So again, in our case today, it's a very, very hard case. I don't know the answer myself. It's in the middle of a war, and there are so many hostages. It could be that they are right, that the people that we can bring home now, the elderly, the children, the women, we have to bring them home now, even if it's at the expense of pausing the war for several days. Again, they'd speak about it again because it's another opportunity.
They want to have a seat.
Yes.
2 or 3 weeks. 2
2 or 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be that there's something true to that. Mordechai, you wanted to ask?
I would just say, going back to what we were talking about, where an individual is negotiating for the release of the hostage, like a husband negotiating for the release of his wife.
Yes.
An individual has limited resources for the most part, as opposed to a nation that has vast resources at their disposal.
Right. Right. So here, yeah, as well, right? It's very different. It's very different. Yeah. Yes.
Why don't we just admit that we're weak already?
Because
And-
we're not.
No, because.
Exactly,
no,
we are not.
because in a certain way, no. What I mean by this is, God is our strength. God is absolutely our strength. We cannot be strong without him.
That's true together with,
And we can't sit and do nothing.
exactly. So
No, I
together
agree
with,
we can't, but at the same time, if we cannot just go and kill those would-be murderers in our midst that are in
so that we're
jail,
going to need to erase.
That'd be fine.
definitely.
That's fine, yeah? Okay.
No, the would-be murderers, they're already established that they tried to murder Jews,
Right. So
and
So it's
they're in
important
jail.
to say a few things. It's important to say a few things about it. First of all, it's important to do what we call hishtadlut, which is our effort. And that's why what the IDF is doing is part of Hashem's will. What does Hashem want? Not to do anything, just to say that we are, that you are our strength and that's it. Hashem basically tells us that we have to go and we have to be strong. Because that's part of his, what he wants. That's called hishtadlut.
No,
When someone, just 1 second, when someone comes to, when someone's not feeling well, unfortunately, so he goes to the doctor. Why does he go to the doctor? Shouldn't he just pray to Hashem? Hashem himself wants him to go to a doctor, not to put all of your trust into the doctor. Even if the doctor says there's no hope, that's something that Hashem says, no, there's no such a thing. If you pray to me, I can cure you. But Hashem wants us to make our efforts. Now to ask,
That's not.
so
what I
that's
was
why we
asking.
are
That's
strong.
really what I was asking.
What is your question?
My actual question is, can we admit to ourselves that we are in a very bad position? Our position is.
I think we
it's
all
not
understand
we are,
it.
But
I
our position is.
think we understand that we are in a bad position after losing 1,200 people on the 7th of October
Yeah.
and the hostages that are there. I think we all understand,
But before that, we didn't really.
right? I think now we understand.
I
And
think we should change,
And now we're united.
bring them home, to send them home. I mean, Hamas is the bad guy, not the Israeli government.
right, so that's another approach on the whole war. And just before you leave, there's a story a bit about Italy.
Okay.
So 2 stories. One story about Italy is the story of the 4 prisoners. The 4 prisoners were basically the founders of Jewish life in Europe. There were 4 big rabbis that basically left Babylon. Babylon was the Jewish world center where there were many yeshivas, and Europe was just getting started with their Jewish life over there. This is, we're talking about, this is the time of the Goyim, probably 1,800 years ago, 1,700 years ago. So this is really the beginning of the Middle Ages. And they were taken captive. They left the city of Bari, southern Italy, and it has a shore, right? It's on the sea.
You can take it to Greece. The boat from
Okay, so they were leaving there, and that's where the pirates caught them. And the pirates sold them. They brought them one to Egypt, one to Cordova, which is in Spain, one to Tunisia, and the 4th one. Sorry, there were two of them were in Spain, and their brothers, the Jewish brothers, redeemed them and rescued them, even though the value was that they asked was much higher than the actual value of those people. And they were the ones to spread Jewish knowledge and Jewish wisdom to establish what is called the yeshivot in Europe at that time. So sometimes also things like this are part of Hashem's plan. And the last story is about the Maharam of Rothenburg, Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg, and he was the leader of the rabbis in Germany, and the king of Germany wanted to take him hostage, forcing the Jews to pay a lot of money to let him free. He escaped to Italy, but then someone told the emperor or the king then that he's in Italy, and Italy and Germany were very, very close at those days. It was all part of what's known as the First Reich, which is the Catholic kingdom that started from Italy, from the Vatican, and went all the way up north to Germany. So they sent him back to Germany. He was taken hostage, and he said to the Jewish people, do not rescue me. And Hanoch, spoke about that soldier that unfortunately he died. He lived very close to here, Ben Zussman, and he lived in Katamon, if I'm not mistaken, very, very close to where we are. And he wrote to his family that if Chas v'Shalom, he's taken hostage, no one should release prisoners for him, which is amazing. And what happened with Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg is he said the same thing, and the Jews did not go and redeem him. And he died in jail after 7 years in Germany. And even the body they did not want to release. Only after 14 years, there's a whole story that they also needed to pay money just to get his body out and to bring him to proper burial. So, yeah, that's a bit of history as well. Very interesting stories. And Bezrat Hashem, I think out of the situation that we are in currently today, the thing that we need the most is the coming of Mashiach. This is what we really need. That's the only real victory that we can have, which will be also the ultimate victory, the coming of Mashiach and the Geula. Thank you very, very much for coming out today. And Bezrat Hashem, next week, Wednesday, hopefully then we'll have 2 shiurim, 10 o'clock the first shiur, 11 o'clock the second shiur. Yeshar Koach.
So,
Thank you.
what if